Well, we're actually going to get started with our topic of figuring out what works and doing more of it in 2023, with Simone actually taking on the beginning of this.
Thank you, Linda. So please take a few moments to read our objectives. So I'm a gardener. I love gardening and plants. So with your indulgence, I will be using some gardening and plant metaphors throughout this presentation. Think of the start of this presentation as preparing the garden and digging up the soil before planting. And how we'll do that is by laying the fundamental knowledge of what a strength-based approach is, including appreciative inquiry. Then the planting of our garden in this presentation will be the discussion of how we use this mindset and approach to inform our teaching throughout the semester. So what is a strength-based approach? It's one that focuses on the positive attributes of a person or a group rather than the negative. It really looks at their capacities, their dignity, their rights, their uniqueness, and their commonalities. Think of it as the flowers on the rose that are blooming. But this rose also has buds. Think of those as the emerging or potential strengths that are in need of a little time or a little cultivating. This approach started in social work, where too many patients were being seen as broken with problems that a professional needs to come in and fix. And this approach did not always result in long-term solutions. So gradually the paradigm started to change to realizing that patients can be resilient and can have pre-existing strengths. And if you can learn to tap into them, then you can have better and longer term results. So this idea spread throughout behavioral health. It's been influential in research, community development, a whole lot of fields where it's being used now. So that means it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but taking a strength-based approach is very applicable to teaching. So sometimes another way to understand what something is to think about what it isn't. And a strength-based approach is the opposite of what we call a deficit-based approach. Continuing the rose metaphor, think of it as a focus exclusively on the thorns instead of the blooms and the buds. From the educational context, it's seeing the student as a sum of their problems, which the educational professional needs to fix. And unfortunately, this is a very common way of approaching a lot of things, including learning situations. And sometimes students have been affected by this deficit-based mindset for a long time, that they also see themselves as having things that are wrong and neglect any talents and skills that they have that they could bring. And sometimes they carry this within them to higher education, and it leads to a sense of hopelessness, both for them as learners and then in how the teachers view them and the learning situation for them. And unfortunately, some students face a lot more of this than others, depending on stereotypes and attitudes that others may be holding against them. So how we see the deficit-based approach in education is multifaceted. It can include focusing too much or solely on what didn't work in a semester. It can manifest in assuming that the students don't know something or can't do something without even doing an assessment to see if that's true. And in particular, it can manifest in assuming that students from a certain background can't or won't be able to perform at the level of students from other backgrounds. So, like I said, it's very normal, it's very typical to focus on weaknesses. And it's funny that this has even come to our artificial intelligence, which is a reflection of how we think. The autocorrect, I start typing in strengths, it always helpfully wants to suggest weaknesses, as if I want to talk about them too and give them equal weight to the strengths. So to come back to the garden analogy, rosebuds have thorns. That would be naive to say that they don't. Of course they exist. But if this was your rose bush, only thorns, you probably wouldn't want to keep it in your garden, right? So the strength-based approach doesn't focus only on the positive. It's not about ignoring issues. it just doesn't focus exclusively on them. It's a realistic look at the person or situation, the whole picture, the thorns, but also the blooms and the buds that will bloom. So tying this back to education and your teaching, remember to always try to focus on all of the positive, the things that are working, the activities that are successful, the growth and success that you're seeing in your students. And also remember, for the weaknesses or the things that aren't going quite as well as planned, you can use these strengths of your students and yourselves to address them.
So as we think about applying the strengths-based approach to teaching and what we can do for this new semester, we want to switch from thinking about problems to possibilities. So some examples of that would be to potentially continue a project or assignment this semester that students noted was very useful or that particularly meets your course objectives very well. You also may want to consider continuing to use technology tools that you know well and are comfortable with. And as faculty, as you are looking at those course evaluations, instead of focusing on that one negative comment, notice all the positive feedback from the majority. And as leadership is also looking at those course evaluations, they should also try to maintain that strengths-based mindset so that they notice all of the good things that are happening in your courses. And as you're thinking about getting ready for a new semester, instead of being frustrated or annoyed that you have to make all these updates to your Canvas site for the new semester, look at this as an opportunity to improve your course while you make those updates.
So far, we've just been using the term strength-based approach, but another term that's sometimes used interchangeably with that is appreciative inquiry. So take a few moments and please read this definition of appreciative inquiry. So you see in this definition that it's more typically used, applied to leadership development and organizational change, either for individuals or groups. But appreciative inquiry does have a framework within it that's used to apply a strength-based approach. And we're going to next discuss how you can use this framework to apply to teaching and education in a way that you can incorporate more of what was successful in the past semester and improve, refine it for the new semester.
So we're going to look at this as a 4-step process to appreciative inquiry. And the first step is discovery. And in this step, the intent is to describe the best of what has been or what is. So in other words, you're looking at your best aspects of your individual peak professional practice and performance, where you identify them, you appreciate them, and you recall them. And keep in mind that this process we're describing here is not necessarily done in isolation. So it's a good idea to pull in a colleague that you can talk about these things with, to consider your strengths as faculty, and to consider the strengths in the courses that you teach in meaningful ways. So you might want to talk to a colleague about what went particularly well, or what you particularly like about teaching the course. And you could ask yourself the question, where was I most energized or engaged in the course? And where were my students, as a means for reflecting on this process? Then you move into the second phase, which is the dream phase. And this step considers what our practice could look like if we were fully aligned around our strengths and aspirations. So in this way, it imagines what might be possible within our professional practice on the basis of our past experiences. So for me, my dream course would be one that is individually applicable to every student, where everybody is fully engaged and successful, and where I know my students as unique individuals. So if I keep that dream state in mind, then I can move into the next phase, which is design. And in this step, I co-construct possibility propositions that allow me to think about challenging the status quo and some assumptions that I may make, and think about, just because a course has always been taught a certain way doesn't mean it has to stay that way. So as you think about your new semester, ask yourself, how can I do more of what was working well? For example, if a group project was particularly engaging and successful, are there any other opportunities for group projects within this course? If I'm particularly fond of online and web conferencing, where can I adapt my course delivery to capitalize on this? And can I ask my department chair for flexibility in course delivery methodology? And then finally, we get to the destiny or delivery phase. And in this step, all of the things that you put in place as what you'd like to do, you actually develop the action plan to do it. So for the examples I shared briefly before, I might need to learn Zoom or Google Meet functionality so that I could deliver my courses via web conferencing. Or I might prepare help guides for my students to be successful using those required technologies. And if I wanted to do more group projects, I might take a Canvas training or read the Canvas help guides on all group assignments so that I understand all the possible functionality available to me. The bottom line is, appreciative inquiry affords us as educators a way to understand the enduring power of educational experiences and work toward our ideal as much as we possibly can.
So I want to encourage you to think of appreciative inquiry and its tools as something you can use throughout the semester and not just as a one and done. It's a well-documented phenomenon that the semesters often start with lots of enthusiasm and focus with both the students and the faculty. We pick this image to represent, though, how as the semester goes by, sometimes we can get a little bit lost in the weeds, that kind of feeling when all the administrative tasks of teaching really come into full play for the faculty, and for the students, the reality of all that they have to do to get through this course and pass it become very clear. So for yourself as faculty, reflect and keep reflecting on your guide stars and make a plan to do so regularly during the semester so that you can stay on target and you don't get lost in the fog. Questions you can ask yourself might include, are you still aligned with the teaching decisions that you made? What are the strengths you have that got you to this role as a teacher in the first place? Are you being true to your own teaching philosophy and to yourself as a teacher? What are your goals as a teacher and for this course, and are you making progress towards them? Now, for your students, be deliberate about planning for ways to encourage them throughout the semester so that their motivation doesn't lag. A lot of you have real strengths at being encouraging for people and to students, to being the morale builder, to giving the pep talks. So think about ways you can do that in your course. And one way using technology is to use our studio. Don't think of our studio as just a place where you go to record your lectures, because you can record all kinds of short videos there as well, including pep talks. So let's plant some seeds for the unrecorded discussion that we're going to have at the end of the presentation. What kind of strengths do you have? And how can they be applied to working with technology in your teaching? And at this point, I just want to note that technology is always changing. So there's often a bit of a learning curve before you can use it. And I consider one of my strengths to be that I can empathize with learners. And so I understand and can relate to the frustration when I'm on a bank website or an online portal or something that I used to be able to use just fine, and then they update it and change it, and I have to spend time learning how to make it work the way I want again. So don't shortchange yourself when it comes to learning technology and your ability to master it, because all of you got through some sort of advanced education to be here today. and you had significant skills and strengths to do that. Ask yourself, well, which of those can be applied to me learning this learning technology? And some of you even learned how to use medical technology, and those skills are particularly applicable to learning educational technology and using it. So this strength to both individuals and groups. We know that some of you team teach. When you do that, each person on the team is going to be bringing in unique strengths to the course. So to capitalize on everyone's unique strengths, try to spend a little time at the beginning of the semester and throughout it to learn about each other's strengths and consider how you can incorporate them in the course. That way you're playing to what everybody is good at. For example, some team members might be particularly strong at designing in Canvas, whereas others might be particularly good at vetting articles or writing thought-provoking questions. So you can be strategic about using everybody's strengths to the best and most efficient method possible in designing the course. But as individuals have strengths, teams as a whole also have strengths, and these strengths can manifest in how you interact together, how you communicate, and how you collaborate on the course design. So also take time at the beginning of the semester to think about these and reflect on them and how you can do more of that. So maybe you had successful brainstorming sessions over the mid-morning bagels. So try to do that more often. Perhaps you've had really nice informal discussions where you share your experiences, and from that, you come up with new and original scenarios and case studies. So keep trying to do that so you can refresh your case studies and your scenarios to make them especially relevant and meaningful.
And even as you think about how this applies to your students doing group projects, you might want to give them those opportunities as well to discuss with their teammates what they're particularly good at. And one of the ways I've done that is to actually have students write a little bit of a contract for their group project, because it allows them to identify their individual strengths and weaknesses so that the team works well and efficiently together.
So when the semester starts, you might not know your learners yet, but you can still start to think about what strengths they might have and also make a plan for how you can keep learning more about them throughout the semester. Ask yourself, well, what kind of strengths does somebody who gets into an advanced healthcare education program already have? What strengths might they be bringing coming from a military background? What about the strengths of somebody who wants to work in healthcare? They like to help others, but what else?
At the beginning of the semester, you could even survey your students to learn about them as people and understand their personal motivations and aspirations. And it is another way to connect with them. And two ways you could also consider doing this would be to create a getting to know you discussion board within your course in Canvas. Or maybe you want to do an activity at the beginning of the semester. I've done one called 2 Truths and a Lie, where we create a slide presentation like a Google Slides, and each student takes a slide, puts their name and photo on it, and then lists 2 truths and a lie, and we play a game. We have the activity in class where the classmates try to determine which item is the lie, but then it also gives me a chance to reflect and review names with faces to learn who they are after the fact, because I have that artifact now that I can refer to. As you think about other ways to use this strengths-based mindset, especially with your learners, think about how you provide feedback to your students on their assignments. So think about sandwiching feedback about any mistakes they've made or any weaknesses you've noticed between 2 positive things that they did particularly well. Just this alone will help your students also focus on their strengths too. In the long run, a strengths-based education allows people to better manage their weaknesses and become independent learners. Or as I've said in my past experiences, we want to capitalize on our strengths and remediate the weaknesses as much as we can. Students ought to be able to talk about what they learn, write reflectively about it, relate it to their past experiences, and apply it to their daily lives. In other words, they must make what they learn part of themselves and take ownership of their need to learn. So we've considered our strengths as faculty, our students' strengths, but now how can we capitalize on technology to help us with appreciative inquiry? So one way you might want to do this to implement your inquiry action plan is to keep you focused on that dream course. And one way to do that would be to create a page in every course that you teach in the unpublished faculty only module, where you can keep notes of what is working particularly well as you go through the course during the semester, so you actually remember. And as you take those notes, yes, you might note some things you need to update or change or make different for the next round, but try to focus also on those positives so you remember to do the things that actually worked. Because chances are in the moment you'll remember, but 3 months from now when you have to start again to get ready for a new course, you won't remember all those details. So keeping this note page in your course directly will allow you to track those things. And another area we can use technology to help us is with data-based decision making. So where do we have data available to us in the learning management system or in other systems that we use that can help us implement this appreciative inquiry approach? So one example would be in videos. So if you have your videos in Panopto, as you can see here on the screenshot, you can click the button for a particular video to see all the statistics that the system automatically captures about that video. So we could use that video data to help us improve our teaching. So when we click into this, you'll see that it immediately gives us a dashboard over time about how many views we've had, how many unique viewers, how much of the video students are watching. So that might give you a clue that if the video is watched more times than there are a number of students in your course, that they are actually watching this video more than once. And you might notice that if there's a particular section they watch multiple times, that is either maybe a particularly dense piece of content that might need clarification, or it's just particularly useful to them. And that might actually help you inform any future edits, or maybe the pace with which you deliver the content, or maybe the structure of the content. But if you look at the data over time, it shows you if the video is used a lot, and it might also give you some clues about where or how you can offer more videos in your classes. And then the last chart it gives you is the viewer engagement. And this one actually can help you notice if students watch the entire video or not. And it might give you a sense of the need to either front load your videos with the most important content, or it might give you an idea of where you want to break apart longer videos into shorter chunks, because as we can see from this chart, the viewership drops off the longer the video goes along. Even though it's only about a 12-minute video, we have less people watching by the end than we did at the beginning. And then as we think about other resources that we have available that relate to this topic of appreciative inquiry today, we've actually done 2 other brown bags in the past, in the recent past, that relate to this topic. So if you're interested in more details and concrete, step-by-steps of the kinds of things you can do, we have one video that we did on gathering informal student feedback and timely feedback from students so that we can inform our subsequent learning sessions. And that one is called Happies, Crappies, and Gotchas. Right? And then the second one that we have that you might find useful related to this topic is what should stay and what should go. We called it the CISO-SIG framework, and that video is available also on our YouTube channel. But all of our past brown bags are available at the USIS YouTube channel, available under the Education and Technology Innovation Professional Development playlist.
So in conclusion, we hope that this talk has inspired you to consider the many strengths that you have and that your students have, and also how technology can be used to magnify them. Remember that ETI is here to support you in your journey. Here are our references. And here are our image acknowledgements. And I just want to note that all of the images we used are public domain. All I had to do was make sure that I acknowledged them properly.
Thank you for watching today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag session. You can view all Teaching with Technology Brown Bags on the USU YouTube channel under the full ETI playlist. Have a nice day.